It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. You'll hear from Brandon Coleman, the 78th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. Coming up before the end of the show, he joined Chris Russell earlier today, as did the Commanders' 5th-round pick, Jared McGee. But right now, we'll get some more insight on Coleman, who might be one of, outside of Jaden Daniels, the most key players in this draft class. And we'll get it from Stephen Simcox, who hosts the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast down there in Fort Worth. Stephen, welcome to the show. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Craig. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So his story, Brandon Coleman's story, is remarkable. Just didn't play football until like his junior year in high school, has to go to a junior college. Like, when did you guys realize that you had something special down there in Fort Worth and that this dude was a really, really good football player?
It probably wasn't until his second year on campus. I mean, you laid out his story pretty well there. He came from Germany. His father was in the military, so he played basketball growing up. He gets to Texas, ends up kind of getting thrown in the football mix because of his size. And after spending some time at the JUCO level, he comes in and starts in 2020, but that was the pandemic-shortened year, so only played in a few games, dealt with some injuries. And then in 2021, he started at guard, and by the time TCU went on their great run in the 2022 season, he was their starting left tackle and did an outstanding job. But, I mean, as far as I don't remember him being a super heralded recruit, right? Like, he was just a JUCO transfer. I feel like most people's read on him coming in was that he was more of a depth piece, and he ended up being the best and most consistent lineman for this team over the last few years. Played at guard, played at tackle, really did everything except snap the ball at center, and was really interchangeable for the Frogs. And honestly, like last season, dealt with some injuries, but I think more than anything, he was the offensive line outside of him was kind of a mess. So they moved him around a lot. Once they got him back at tackle, that seemed to be the best fit for him. Especially in pass protection, the team improved, and he just became one of the most consistent players on the team during a time where TCU had some unprecedented success.
So that was going to be, I think, the main big question that we're trying to answer here in D.C., because everyone was freaking out that this team didn't address the tackle position. And because people typically hear, oh, he could play tackle, he could play guard. And it's like, well, yeah, then he's going to play guard in the NFL. That's how that goes. But it seems like Coleman not sticking at tackle for his entire time at TCU seemed to be a lot more about everybody else, not so much about him. What more can you tell me and our audience of Commanders fans about why he moved around so much at TCU?
Well, when the offensive line was at its most stable while he was there, that was the season where they had a great run and beat Michigan in the playoffs. He was at tackle, and then they had 3 guys graduate, a couple guys that signed, undrafted free agent deals in the NFL. They were reworking the offensive line, and so they had issues in the interior. They brought in some transfers, but it wasn't really working out during fall camp. So essentially they slid him back inside because that was the biggest need along the offensive front, and he was their best O-lineman, and he was interchangeable and had that position flex. And then as the year went on, they were struggling in pass protection. They moved him back to tackle. I mean, at both spots, he only allowed 1 sack. But I think, he's got an ability to be a mauler, Craig, at times in the run game. He's a good finisher. But honestly, I feel like his biggest asset is athleticism. We talked about him playing basketball growing up. He did really well at the combine, put up great numbers. He moves well. He's able to pull out in space and find work and get up to the next level and make things happen. So that footwork and that ability to, get in a pass set and then use his body well, use his hands well, that really benefits him at the tackle position. And so I think that's where he's in his most natural fit. It's where he played the best this past season once they sort of figured out some moving parts and got him in a more natural position. And then also, like, he's still relatively new to football, because he didn't play until his junior year of high school. And I think that athleticism allowed him to kind of be an interchangeable part along the offensive line. But, his best tape and his best games were at that tackle position. And I think because of his ability and availability, he was just someone who kind of had to be everywhere for them to try to fill in the gaps in what was a team that dealt with some injuries and some inexperience up front last season.
Stephen Simcox, host of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast, is with us here on the Hoffman Show, talking about Brandon Coleman, the third-round pick from TCU for the Commanders. Now, he, as you said, switched positions, was bounced back and forth a bit his final year at TCU. From what I understand, he was also battling some injuries. How did he play, and how much did the injuries affect how he played?
He left the game against Texas Tech with an ankle injury, and that was a prevailing theme throughout the year. Also was dealing with some knee problems, but he gutted through it. I mean, I think he showed a lot of toughness. It did affect his play. I feel like he was a step slower than normal, but they needed him on the field, and he was there. He played through that. And that's really been the only issue. I mean, he had some ligament damage his first season on campus. That was a season-ending injury. But other than that, he's been really healthy. You know, he played just about every snap in that 2022 season at left tackle. But, yeah, did deal with some kind of being banged up throughout the year this past season, but seemed to handle that well and at least was a factor on the field. And I think Brandon Coleman at 80 or 90% was better than the other options they had, so they kept running him out there as long as he was able to kind of get through the pain and play at the level that he could.
One thing that's a consistent through line for the Commanders in their draft class is they got really physical, tough guys who finished. They were team captains, leaders. What can you tell us about Brandon Coleman, like the human and the football character of a guy like Coleman?
He's got a nasty streak to him, and I mean in a good way, the type of toughness and physicality you want from an offensive lineman. He likes to put guys on the ground. He likes to lay on top of guys once he finishes blocks. So that's a big positive. You know, he brought it each and every week. I think Brandon is more of a lead-by-example type of guy. He talked last season about how the coaches were encouraging him because of his leadership and his experience on the team to be more vocal, even though that's a little bit more out of his comfort zone. But super interesting guy. I mean, as I said, really intriguing background, you know, lived overseas and carries himself really well, high character player. I think the Commanders are getting someone who can come in, take care of his business, and should be a great fit in the locker room right away. And obviously, I don't think they'll be asking him for that type of immediate leadership, but he has great work ethic and should be someone who just comes in and kind of falls in line with what everybody else is doing.
Every college is a little bit different in terms of access, so I don't know how much personal time you've gotten to spend with him or for people who have gotten to spend time with him. But do you have any specific stories? Like, do you have a Brandon Coleman story that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I got to talk to him. Probably the best access we got was at Big 12 Media Days. And he's a really funny dude. You know, he's relatively quiet. I guess all those guys kind of are in those media settings for the most part, but seems to get along great with his teammates. You know, that was the big takeaway I had from the time that I got with him was that the guys loved him. They respected him. You know, he was joking around with Bud Clark last year, who was another, you know, main piece of the teams the past few seasons, and super interesting guy. So excited for Commanders fans to get to know him because, yeah, he's a great player and from all accounts seems like a really good person too.
And then last thing, I'm gonna lead on the NFC East down there, Steven, since you're in the neighborhood. I loved the first couple of picks, especially from the Cowboys. Their draft seems to have very mixed reviews. What do you make of what the Cowboys did over the weekend?
I mean, staying in the Big 12, I really like the Cooper Beebe pickup. And then they also got Tyler Guyton in the first round, which I think makes sense, even though he seems like more of a development prospect. The thing I don't understand, Craig, is, you know, I know they had a long gap in between picks in the third round and fifth round, but not coming away with a running back is a head scratcher to me. I know they're reuniting with Zeke, which to me kind of feels like getting back with an old flame when you don't want to download a dating app again. But yeah, Dallas is constantly interesting. I feel like Dak is at his best when they've got a strong running game, and I know, you know, paying running backs is not in vogue now, but I thought they would have put more investment in that position going into this upcoming season.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Stephen, where I look at what they did, and I'm like, I like all that stuff, but you guys didn't do a thing that you needed to. And by the way, you guys can do it in a way that others can't because you have a lot of other needs that are filled. But, well, alas, Jerry, there's only so much Will McClay can do. It's a lesson I learned when I was working down there long ago. Stephen Simcox, Locked On Horned Frogs is the podcast. If you want anything else on TCU. Stephen, this was great, man. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for spending some time with us here on the Hoffman Show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.